Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. I am thrilled to be with you today, and I'm excited about our topic. We're going to be talking about emotional intelligence today, and this topic excites me because people tend to get excited when I say I want to dig into this. And I think it's because a lot of us don't know quite what we're supposed to do about emotional intelligence, but we know we're supposed to try to get better at it. And so we're trying to figure out, how do I get better at this thing? What does it exactly mean? And what are the things I can actually do to improve? So emotional intelligence really is the cornerstone of transformative leadership. It really is kind of the foundation that allows us to go from being in a position of being able to support others and help others grow and develop, and then take them to a place where they can have impact, where we can see our impact beyond the people that we're leading, because then we see the way that they're able to have impact. So it becomes like multi-layer, right? Which is exciting. It's exciting to see our leadership in this way and to see the potential that we have to have really, tremendous impact in these extenuating circumstances and extenuating ripples of our influence over the course of our career or over the course of our leadership in any given arena. So I want to talk a little bit about what things you can do to advance your emotional intelligence. So your emotional intelligence really is about how you see yourself in relationship to other people. How can you decenter yourself? How can you be in a situation and not just see what you might need in a situation or how you might be experiencing a situation, but also see there's people around me and how are they experiencing this differently? And what does that mean? And how can I then show up as a person that can be supportive of not only my own needs, but maybe supportive of other people's needs at the same time? And when we look at emotional intelligence and we look at what we all have to gain from increasing our emotional intelligence, we really, there's like no limit to what we have to gain, but what we have to lose if we aren't working on this, that's where things can get a little sticky, if not troublesome. If we're not working on our emotional intelligence as leaders, then we do stand to lose a lot. We stand to be really misunderstood. We stand to be isolated. We stand to not really have the power that we probably want to have, because our power is going to be probably misinformed and misleading at times. We're probably going to be in a place of sometimes doing harm, whether or not we intend to. And we are probably going to struggle in really feeling good about how we're showing up as leaders and feeling good about the legacy and really, maximizing our legacy as much as we can over the course of our time in our roles. So emotional intelligence starts with looking inward. So before we look outward in terms of how our emotional intelligence can impact other people, let's look inward in terms of how we can look inward to reflect on development of our self-awareness in order to extend and amplify our emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence, and we're going to talk about 3 different steps that you can take. So when we talk about this internal practice and we start looking inwards, emotional intelligence really is about understanding that you have this internal kind of personal GPS system where you are able to look inward, assess a situation, assess how you feel or the emotional experience you're having in a situation, and then make decisions from there. And in this, you're also able to look at what are the things that trigger you? What are your patterns? What are your behaviors and habits? What's the inner dialogue that you hold that informs your decision and your action taking? When we can look inward and identify those triggers and the patterns that we see, then we can look at, are these working for me? Are they not working for me? Could I try something new? Are these harmful maybe to other people, harmful to myself? Are there other things that I could be doing that could maybe be better? So this is really about pausing, looking inward, observing, and reflecting. And when we do that, we're able to have a better understanding of what we're experiencing internally. And when we have a better understanding of what we're experiencing internally, we can own that. And when we can own what we're feeling internally, then we can start to make informed decisions about what we want to do with that. So I can be feeling really angry about something, and instead of just flying into a fit of rage at the next person who walks in front of me, I can recognize like, okay, let me pause for a minute. Let me think. I'm like feeling really angry right now or frustrated or whatever the feeling is. And now knowing that, what do I want to do with that? When we can pause in those moments and realize what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, and then make a decision about how we want to show up, it totally changes our behavior in some situations. And it changes then how other people experience us and experience our behavior as well in those moments, and especially in those tricky, sticky kinds of moments. When we can connect to our emotions and what we're feeling in a moment, and we can make decisions based on that, then we start to mitigate the risk of being harmful by making emotion-based decisions. So that first step of increasing your emotional intelligence really is looking inward. Now, I also want you to be thinking about how can you be guiding those that you lead through these same steps. So if I'm starting to do this myself, I'm starting to look at how I'm being more thoughtful about my own internal feelings, how I'm noticing what I'm feeling, how I'm noticing my triggers and my patterns and my responses. How can I then help others do the same? So when we model that self-awareness, it might look like saying in a moment to someone, hey, I'm just going to pause for a sec. Like, some things are coming up for me. I just need to think this through. Just give me a minute. So it might be modeling that pause. It might be modeling that pause so that other people then have permission to, instead of them flying off the handle in a situation or them running away from a situation where they maybe could or should stand up and advocate for themselves, they might do that, model that same behavior. So they might take that pause next time. When we can model that and we can help other people see what that looks like, then they have permission to be vulnerable enough to start practicing that themselves. We've also indicated to them that it's okay to push pause and to push pause and be able to identify feelings in a moment. That's an acceptable, that's a safe behavior when you're around me. That's a huge leadership skill, right? To be able to say like, hey, it's safe for you to push pause if you're feeling overwhelmed by something, or if you're feeling an emotion that you need a minute to process, that's okay, right? Because we've all been in situations where that has not been okay. So when we can be in places where we recognize that that's okay and we're modeling that, that provides a lot of psychological safety, but also builds a lot of trust with the folks that we're leading. When we're doing that, then hopefully they're modeling that to other people as well. We're doing it in front of them. They go and do that for other people. And again, then those ripples and impact become more and more significant over time. The second thing you can do to increase your emotional intelligence is to really look at your emotional regulation strategies. And so the first thing is looking inward and identifying, like, what am I feeling right now? Am I feeling like I just want to run away and hide? Am I feeling like big and angry and I want to explode? When I'm noticing what I'm feeling, then what am I going to do with that? What are my emotional regulation strategies? So if I know that a certain situation tends to lead me to feeling a certain way, or maybe a certain time of day, it gets to the end of the day and I'm tired and I'm hungry, and I'm just cranky and I'm over it all. What are the emotional regulation strategies that I can use in those moments, knowing that this is a situation where I tend to feel a certain way? So emotional regulation is not at all about suppressing emotion. It's not about don't let it show. It's not about emotional control. It's about the regulation and the strategies so that when the emotions come up, we can process them in a healthy way instead of just trying to push them back down where they then start to seep out or explode in unhealthy or unhelpful or even harmful ways. So it's that effective management that becomes really key. A lot of times as women, we are really conscientious about how we show emotion because we're wanting to be careful about what our emotion looks like to other people, especially if we're one of very few women in the room. So the other component of emotional regulation is recognizing, instead of just stuffing down an emotion that we don't want to demonstrate, especially in a room of males, how can we own and honor the true emotion, manage it in the moment, and then move on or return to it later because maybe we weren't able to fully process it in that moment. So that might look like, feeling pretty frustrated about something in a given moment, but recognizing if I'm the only woman in this room and I get angry right now, everyone's going to say she's just so emotional. So I'm going to hold it together. I'm going to recognize that this is a really frustrating conversation for me. This is disappointing. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm whatever the feeling is. Here's how I'm going to behave in this moment, which might be a little bit of kind of overriding those emotions. And then later today, I'm going to make sure I go for a run. I'm going to make sure that I do some meditation. I'm going to make sure that I talk about this in therapy or talk about it with my partner or my friend. I'm going to make sure that I do something to process this later, knowing that I might have to stifle it in the moment because that's the safest thing for me to do in that moment. When we can practice emotional regulation and we can understand how we can have these strategies on hand, then we really can become better at managing and processing emotions in the moment so that we don't have things that are either bottling up or trickling over and later exploding. So, how can you recognize what are strategies that work for you? So, maybe this is pausing and taking some deep breaths. Maybe this is giving yourself permission to leave the room for a second and just saying, hey, I need a minute. Maybe this is doing mindfulness meditation before you go into a meeting or before you start a long day or on a day when you have back to back to back events or calls where you're not going to get time for yourself. Maybe this is, for me, it's working out first thing in the morning. So, for me, knowing that I'm pretty high strung and pretty anxious and that my focus can be pretty intense, and my emotions can be pretty intense, knowing that if I work out first thing in the morning, this really helps me get a hold on all of that so that I feel a little more calm and focused for the day. So what are your strategies that help you manage emotion throughout the day? It might be better boundary setting. It might be saying like, hey, I'm feeling really tired. I can't take something else on right now. Or my plate is feeling really full. I'm unable to do that. So practicing those different behaviors, practicing setting boundaries over time can be really helpful. The other thing is practice reframing negative situations. So recognizing that a situation might be big and frustrating and overwhelming, and maybe it's always big and frustrating and overwhelming. And how can you start to reframe your narratives that aren't working for you? When we find ourselves stuck in these narratives where we're in a constant loop, where we feel like nothing is working and it's always the wrong thing and no one ever gets it, those kinds of narratives aren't helpful for us. And so how can we be better emotional managers by recognizing those patterns, if those are some of our tendencies to get into those negative cycles, and then find new cycles to bring ourselves into. So looking at building new narratives and looking at those places where we tend to get stuck on those loops and creating new loops. So then what do we do if we are trying to model this for others? So some of it is practicing it in live time, as I've mentioned, doing it right in front of others, sharing your strategies, sharing what's working, not being afraid to say like, hey, I'm going to take a lunch break and do my meditation right now, to like be really explicit about like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. This is the thing that I do that helps me in all these other ways. So the things that helps me manage my emotional being in the rest of the day, not being afraid to use that as a form of leadership, that you're modeling those behaviors. Another thing is creating safe spaces for emotional check-ins. So when you're seeing someone struggling, to say, hey, are you okay? I want to check in. It looks like some stuff might be coming up. So doing those check-ins, because we want people to check in with us, right? Like how good would it feel if the people who never notice when we're frustrated were to say, are you okay? It seems like you might be feeling a little frustrated, or it seems like something might be getting to you right now. And then offering those, strategies and tips, the things that work for you, but also just the things that work on a larger scale and building them into your work culture. I'm working for an organization right now where everyone in the organization has access to the Calm app for meditation, and they're just loving it. And they're all like swapping their favorite meditations and their favorite nighttime sleep meditations. So it's part of the culture that they're talking about mindfulness and they're talking about emotional regulation. So building it in that way. And then the third thing that you can do to increase your emotional intelligence is to cultivate empathy and social awareness. And it sounds a little silly maybe to say like, hey, just be more empathetic, because sometimes it seems like either you have that or you don't. And that's not true. You actually can develop empathy over time. You can strengthen and heighten your empathy over time. And so how can we do this? And how can we make our empathy our superpower? This doesn't mean we give everyone a free pass for everything at all. It means that we have an understanding, and we challenge ourselves to have an understanding of other people's perspectives and what it must be like to have that perspective. So you're really understanding someone else's emotional experience, not just by sympathizing, but really thinking through, what does that feel like? So challenge yourself next time you know that someone's having a rough day and they share that with you and they tell you a little bit about the situation. Give yourself a little extra time to think through, what is that like for them? How is that impacting their work? How does that impact how they sit in a conversation? How does it impact how they sit in a meeting? How does it impact what they are going home to tonight? When we can really take that extra time to think through how someone else is experiencing something, it allows us to amplify and elevate our emotional intelligence, to be more connected to other people's human experience. And that is how we increase our emotional intelligence, through practicing empathy like that. It takes that extra time and that extra pause, especially if you're not used to thinking that deeply about how other people experience the world. So this might feel a little bit challenging, but the payoff is that you're going to be able to build stronger relationships. You're going to be able to relate to people in a different way. And that will allow you to be able to build more trust, to be able to build relationships where there's more safety. And when there's more safety, then what you all can do together in any sort of environment becomes exponentially greater than when we're all on our own islands experiencing everything in our own little echo chambers and no one understands how anyone else is experiencing a situation. So how do we develop that empathy beyond beyond what I've just shared? Active listening, really listening to what people are saying, asking really great follow-up questions. Say more about that. What is that like for you? Trying to put ourselves in other people's situations and think through what something might feel like to another person. You can even there's perspective exercises you can do if you just Google perspective exercises or empathy exercises. Doing check-ins with people that are beyond work performance or beyond checking in on work projects and questions on work projects. So really checking in with people like as humans. Hey, I know there's a lot of hard things in the world right now, and I just wanted to check in and see how are you doing? You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of the hard things in the world or take sides on the hard thing, just acknowledging there's a lot of hard stuff going on right now. You can even say, I know a lot of people on the team are, having a rough moment. So it doesn't have to be about just pinpointing one person. And then how can you invite people to share more of themselves in ways that feel safe? So let them talk about their pets or their plants. Let them talk about what they did over their weekend. It doesn't mean that they talk about every single private thing, but again, just getting to know the nuance of people a little bit more so that when you're in situations with them, you have a better understanding of who they are and who they're bringing to the table. So when we look at how we can practice cultivating empathy and social awareness in terms of supporting our leaders in gaining this, then what do we do there? So this looks like during one-on-ones, going beyond just asking how things are doing, how things are going in a project. This goes along the lines of asking those more thought-provoking questions where you're engaging in a human-to-human conversation, not a work transaction. So really looking at how can I engage with this person as a person versus engaging with an employee in a transaction, right? So it's not about an assignment, it's about a relationship. And that's really, really different. Asking someone, how are you really doing? How can I support you better? What do you need? How are you, what's challenging for you right now? How can I show up? Is asking those kinds of questions when someone says something and you're not quite sure what they mean by it, or you're like, I'm not sure if they're really saying the whole story, just say, can you tell me more about that? So really opening those open-ended questions to let people start to express themselves. So now how do we bring this together? So bringing it together, recognizing that emotional intelligence is not about a destination. It's not that you're going to go through some steps and then you're going to be there. It really is about cultivating these human-to-human skills over time. And it's a long-term journey. It's a long-term process. It's about continuous growth. It's about vulnerability. It's about modeling vulnerability and then holding space for other people's vulnerability. And it really is about building authentic connections. And if that's not something that you're used to, it might feel a little uncomfortable. So a little bit at a time is fine, but it's building those authentic connections where you're really building a relationship between one human and yourself, another human and yourself, and recognizing I want to get to know this about you. I want to understand this about you. It's important to me that you feel seen, heard, held, and valued. So I'm going to spend some time figuring out how to see, hear, hold, and value you so that we can feel like we're in this together. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned something. I hope we demystified a little about what is emotional intelligence? Why is it important? And how can I start to amplify it or advance it in my own work? And then also, how can I not just advance my own emotional intelligence, but how can I also really be considering how can I advance the emotional intelligence of the people that I'm working with? Because when we're all advancing our emotional intelligence at the same time, again, the possibility and the potential really expands exponentially in terms of how we can build these really powerful, significant relationships that allow us to do amazing, incredible work together. So I hope this was helpful. Please share this episode out with other leaders that you think would be informed and influenced by this so that they can also increase their emotional intelligence. Thank you for being here today. And remember that I'm in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.